in the evening, on Tuesday, June 5th, 1979, 5 weeks before the murder of Carmine, two undercover police officers in an unmarked Plymouth Valiant drive into the parking lot of the Green Acres Mall. The purpose of the visit is to stake out the nearby California pizzeria, which is believed to be a source of heavy drug dealing activity. The place is also known to belong to Bonanno wise guy, Gerlando Shasha, a made member of the Bonanno crime family, and also a top member of the Sicilian faction. Shasha, who was born in Castellamare del Golfo, Sicily, is closely tied to certain top members of the Montreal crew, and is using his restaurant as a front to sell heroin, supplied via the Montreal connection, or so law enforcement believed at the time. The surveillance team had no sooner parked outside the restaurant when they spot, waiting in another parked car, two other notorious Zips linked to the Bonanno family. Born in Castellamare del Golfo, Sicily, Baldassare, Amato, and Cesare Bonventre are members of the Sicilian Mafia and are among the most aggressive Zips in the Bonanno family's Brooklyn-based Sicilian faction. The officers drive away from the restaurant in the direction of Gimbel's department store and park in such a way that they can covertly watch the two Zips in the Cadillac without being made. Baldo and Cesare remain in their car for about a half hour. Then the Cadillac, the car they're sitting in, it slowly pulls out of its parking spot and drives closer to the pizzeria. Around then, the two officers notice someone else has shown up for the party. Cadillac number 2 is also quietly idling outside the California pizzeria. It's closing time. Through binoculars, one of the officers watch as a man and a woman leave the restaurant and lock up for the night. The man has silver hair and a stocky build. The officers believe he's probably George Shasha. He finishes the door and gets into a third Cadillac, parked near the eatery. The guy who's probably Shasha then drives towards the Cadillac the two Zips are in and idle alongside it for about a minute, while the occupants of the two vehicles briefly communicate. Shasha's Cadillac, Cadillac number 3, then heads north and stops suddenly in the middle of the parking lot. The Cadillac with Amato and Bonventre makes a sharp turn and also stops, facing south. Baffled by the odd movements of the two vehicles, the officers sense something consequential is in progress and radios for backup. Within minutes, another unmarked police car quietly enters the parking lot and parks out of sight of the various Sicilian wise guys and God knows who else. The officers observe Cadillac number 3, the one with Shasha, flash its high beams. Cadillac number 1, the car with Baldo and Cesare, does the same. Caddy number 3 then pulls up to caddy number 1. In quick succession, they watch as Cesare steps out carrying a white plastic bag, tightly concealed against his body. He delivers it to the other Cadillac and emerges clutching a leather jacket draped around something stiff, about 3 feet long, the shape of a shotgun. He carries it over to the driver's side of Cadillac number 2 and hands it to the man at the wheel. All 3 Cadillacs then quickly take off. The officers in the Valiant chase after the man they think is Shasha, in one of the Cadillacs, but the vehicle speeds away from the scene, moving at a tremendously high rate of speed, the officer said, as fast as the car can go, starting from a dead stop. Cadillac number 2, with the forever unidentified occupants, also speed away and vanishes into the night. Born in Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily, January 1st, 1951, Cesare Bonventre was a member of the Sicilian Mafia. During the 1960s, the New York crime families imported young men from Sicily into the United States to work as drug traffickers and hitmen. The American mobsters soon dubbed them Zips due to their fast speech. When Cesare entered the U.S. at the age of 17, he had few skills beyond a natural ability with a Licata, a sawed-off shotgun. But he was quick and good-looking, and he did have some connections. Carmine brought Cesare to New York to be his bodyguard. Cesare's uncle was Giovanni Bonventre, a former Bonanno underboss. Cesare was also cousin of the first family boss, Joe Bonanno, and Bonanno mobster, Baldo Amato. He frequented his cousin Baldo's deli, run by his family, located at 2nd Avenue and 84th Street in Upper Manhattan. Cesare was impatient, so when he tired of the construction job his family had found him, he sought and found something better. His moniker was the tall guy because he was tall, over 6 feet, lean and attractive. Cesare was described by one author as having something about him that made him stand out from the other ethnic Italians. His stylish clothing, aviator sunglasses, and European man purses embodied Italian couture. He normally wore his shirt unbuttoned, with a gold crucifix hanging from his neck. He frequented clubs such as the Toyland Social Club and the Knickerbocker Avenue area with other Sicilian mobsters. He was suave and debonair, a fashionista, but he was also ruthless and very dangerous, responsible for as many as 20 mob killings. Born December 15th, 1951, Baldassare Amato emigrated from Castellammare del Golfo, Italy, to New York City at the age of 18 and lived in Brooklyn. The New York Times correspondent, Ralph Blumenthal, describes Amato as looking like a fierce Alain Delon, darkly handsome, a wave of thick black hair, deep-set sparkling eyes, full sensuous lips. He told police he was a delicatessen owner. The backup car, the one the surveillance team had radioed, hit pay dirt. They pulled over Cesare and Baldo's Cadillac near the westbound exit for Sunrise Highway. Cesare identified himself as a 28-year-old pizza man from Brooklyn, born in Castellammare del Golfo. The pizza business must be good, the officers thought. He was carrying around $1,800 in $50 bills. His passenger Baldo said he was a 27-year-old deli owner, also of Brooklyn and Castellammare. One of the officers used his flashlight to examine the contents of the car, which included a startling array of goodies that would have made Theodore Robert Bundy blush. The pizza man and his deli man friend were driving around with a small arsenal, comprising a loaded Smith & Wesson, a .38 5-shot, the same model the officer himself carried, the serial number of which someone had taken great pains to obliterate, a Colt .38, also loaded, and 2 black wool knit ski masks. And that's just the back seat. A box on the floor by the front seat held a switchblade knife and bullets. 3 additional knives, 2 pairs of rubber gloves, and a rubber Halloween mask were found in the trunk. Also collected was pocket litter, as police call it, scraps of paper, matchbook covers, etc., covered in handwritten scribblings, names, telephone numbers. At the time, the officers simply documented the handwritten data, being far more interested in the shotgun that apparently had been distributed from Shasha's car. Cesare Bonventre and Baldo Amato were arrested on weapons charges and were swiftly granted bail and allowed to return to whatever business they were up to. Whether the missing shotgun was one of the 2 shotguns used 5 weeks later on the back patio of Joe and Mary's Italian restaurant is a question that would taunt at least 2 FBI agents for quite some time. Bushwick, once a prosperous enclave, was a fading Bonanno stronghold at the time. The neighborhood, nestled between Williamsburg and Bedford-Stuyvesant, just across the Queens border, was actually in steady decline. It had the dubious distinction of suffering more than any other neighborhood in New York City during the blackout of July 1977, which ignited a violent outburst of arson and looting that resulted in 4 city blocks in Bushwick burning to the ground. In 1979, Bushwick was in the midst of a downward cycle that would see it lose 20% of its housing, 1/3 of its population, and almost half of its businesses. Mobsters, especially Zips, they still clung to the area and operated or hung out in the remaining mob-controlled storefronts, the cafes, and pizza shops. The avenue was filled with violent and improbable mobsters, crowding the sidewalks and meeting at the major intersection points for members of the Bonanno family in this part of Brooklyn. One of the perceived benefits for wise guys was that undercover agents and members of law enforcement tended to stand out on Knickerbocker Avenue. Carmine was often observed with dark-skinned, swarthy Italians, and they spoke only in the Sicilian dialect as they discussed business. These were the hungry and ambitious young mafiosi he had imported from the island following that visit back in 1957. He was allowing them to set up their own crews and establish business interests, especially on Knickerbocker Avenue. Bakeries, pizza parlors, pastry shops, and cafes. These were the Zips, men who would become his right-arm soldiers and bodyguards, formed the main structure of the Bonanno crime family. These imports, they were a different breed to their American counterparts. Let me tell you something. These Sicilian mafiosi, They will run into a wall, put their head in a bucket of acid for you, if they're told to. Not because they're hungry, but because they are disciplined. They've been brought up from birth over there to show some fucking respect. Honor. That's what these fucking punks over here do not have. Once they're told to get somebody, that cocksucker doesn't have a fucking chance. Carmine, who had seized control of the Bonanno family in 1976, had also angered members of his own family for his refusal to share the proceeds from the narcotics trade. As his nephew James Galante drives away from the drop-off, Carmine pushes open the front door to Joe and Mary's Italian restaurant. A Frank Sinatra album is propped up on the front counter, and a print of Da Vinci's The Last Supper is mounted on the wall. Carmine often visits Joe and Mary's restaurant, which is owned by a distant cousin, Giuseppe Joe Turano, a Bonanno soldier, along with his wife, Mary. The reason for Carmine's visit today is to attend a bon voyage luncheon for his cousin. Joe will be leaving the next day to join his family on vacation in Sicily. Carmine had placed Salvatore Toto Catalano, who moved to New York from Sicily in 1961, and was now one of his capos, in charge of the area. Toto had stepped up after 70-year-old Pietro Licata, an old-time Bonanno captain, had been shot dead November of 1976, allegedly by Cesare Bonventre, now one of Carmine's bodyguards. Licata had been deep into drug trafficking, along with Carmine. I mean, he oversaw the criminal activities in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Knickerbocker Avenue, and he was one of the few family members who opposed the Zips. The murder of Licata occurred shortly before midnight, Wednesday, November 4th, 1976. Licata and his wife were returning to their two-story brick home in Queens. As Licata approached an ornamental iron gate in front of his house, an unidentified man appeared, leveled a shotgun at him, and fired. Bonventre had pressed the man who had once been his patron to yield to him his ownership of a restaurant he coveted. He forced Mafia Don Frank Lupo out of his established territory. The Don had to set himself up in a new one, in Miami. Now, aside from designer duds, Cesare would buy himself a sleek red Ferrari and took to wearing evening attire as he held court at his newly acquired Brooklyn restaurant. The lunch crowd has left, and the restaurant is empty, except for three men, Joe Paravati and his friend, Joe Polisi, along with another man. They're eating at a table in the rear, just left to the door that leads out to the patio. Carmine stops to talk to the grandmother of the family, Constance, who is knitting at a table. He greets his 48-year-old cousin, Giuseppe Joe Torano, and his son, John, and daughter, Constanza, nodding at the cook counterman, and then goes through to sit outside. The two men like to eat in the open air, so a table has been set up on the restaurant's backyard, amid grapevines and tomato plants, which lends a modest pastoral setting to that small patch of Brooklyn. A yellow and turquoise checkered umbrella hangs over the table, which itself is covered in a floral patterned oilcloth. Lunch has been specifically prepared today for a party of three: Carmine, his cousin Joe Torano, and Angelo Presenzano, now age 72. They had been together a long time, and although he was getting on in years, Moe had still not lost his quick and fiery temper. During the Banana War in the 1960s, Moe had been, on one occasion, a patient in Manhattan's University Hospital. He kept a loaded .38 caliber revolver in his bedside cabinet. There is no doubt, had someone come after him, there would have been a shootout in the ward. Carmine and company sit at the table in the shade of the umbrella, feasting on a light lunch, fish, salad, and a jug of red wine. At about 1:30, the door to the restaurant opens, and Leonardo Coppola, age 40, a reputed drug dealer and close associate of Carmine's, walks in. He's accompanied by two tall, good-looking young Italians. Both, despite the heat, are wearing heavy leather jackets to conceal handguns in their belts. The three men, Leonardo Coppola, Baldassare Amato, and Cesare Bonventre, join Carmine, Joe Torano, and Angelo Presenzano on the patio. The six men chat for a while, then the three newcomers go back into the restaurant to have lunch. Carmine and the other two men have already eaten and are sitting under the shade of the yellow and turquoise checkered umbrella, smoking, talking among themselves. Back inside the restaurant, the lunch menu consists of fish, lettuce and tomato salad, rolls, fresh fruit, and a carafe of red wine. Cesare, who does not like fish, orders steak. The three men eat and chat. Time passes. Knickerbocker Avenue had for over 50 years been the turf of the Bonanno crime family, according to FBI files, an ant-heap of underworld activity. Here, in the heartland of his criminal empire, Carmine Galante probably felt as safe here as he would in the comforts of home.